Philosophers talk to our times, towards a theory of common notions. Habits. I was going to do another dystopia, but I just can't face it. So we'll carry on with habits. This is very firmly habit part 1. And then I'm going to outline a theory of habits that isn't drawing massively on Spinoza. I'll come back to Spinoza the second time I go through and show you how Spinoza is using his theory of emotions to develop a theory of habits that lead into common notions. But first of all, I actually think I need to defend habit. That's a weird position to be in. Why am I, an English philosopher, defending the notion of habits? I blame Hume. Now, those of you who watch this channel know that I have a love affair with David Hume. I think he's wonderful. But one of the effects that Humean sort of skeptical empiricism has, it's not really empiricism at all. He calls it mild skepticism, but somewhat fundamental skepticism that undermines the ontology of the world is that it turns habit into, if not a passive force, a force that is floating above reality. So that to form a habit is to create your own mind, to create your own thought. Deleuze in Difference in Repetition has habits as the first repetition, the if-then, which allows you to create little empirical selves, little flickers, moments that you are you. And he follows up then something that's very Humean, that there is no necessary holding self in Hume, or if it is, there is one actually, but if there is, it's very empty. You could have lots of little empirical selves. Each one's like a little I think of Kant saying, this is it, this is it, this is it. And Deleuze would say, in time, difference in repetition, over the course of the life, you do, and you have myriad of them, and they change and shift. But is that all habit is? Really? The point is then, it is almost pitched against reality. It is the assertion of your reality in the face of ... A rationalist version of habit, which Spinoza certainly wants to argue for, cannot work by that logic. It just won't work by that logic. Because rationalists, of course, believe in actuality. They believe in the inner reality that is accessible and perceivable. And so habit and forming good habits is right at the core of how you access that reality. I've heard it said that if you took out God and the common notion, then Hume and Spinoza are practically the same. And there is an aspect of Hume where he is just taking the first form of the three forms of knowledge and turning it into a viable philosophy. But habit, as Spinoza uses it, cannot simply be reduced to something I have. And why? Because habits are shared. A good habit, what makes a habit good for Spinoza is the fact that I can have it and you can have it, and we'll both be enriched by it. It is in the sharing of my habits that they actually start to matter. Now, that's not universally true, and before we finish, I will talk about one of my own personal habits, the one that gets me up. It's about 6:30-ish in France, doing that every morning, which isn't a habit I would recommend necessarily to everybody. But by and large, good habits are the ones that you can share, or at least you can communicate why you do it. They have a reason. They have a purpose. More than that, they're not just what your mind is. They're what your mind is as it is on a journey. Good habits are not the way you stick your mind here in the endless if-then. No. A good habit is what allows you to know you're on a journey at all. Allows you to understand the nature of change inside the habit. That endless dreary if-then is the weakest form of habit, the one that binds the soul, and the one that Hume is interested in. Spinoza will present, or within the orb of Spinozaisms, 4 versions of knowledge. I know he says there are 3, but then he lists 4. I think we can detect 4 different senses of good habit, all of which stand at the gateway of common notions. To remind you, common notions are that way you enter into compound with the universe, with the world beyond you. The universe is too pompous a term. With everything else, be it dogs or humans or molecules. And through understanding what you have in common, not as a passive thing, but as an active thing. So through understanding those exchanges that you can make one to the other, the sense in which you can be caught up in each other, you can transform who and what you are and your capacity to act. Right at its bedrock, then, it has the idea of God as the absolute middle. And what a common notion does is it puts you in the middle of an idea and allows you to understand that idea from within. So that as the thing you're responding to changes, you get another idea and change it back again. It's like a two-way exchange, a conversation. But a conversation with the world, with humans, but also with matter. In a sense, a classic example would be elements. Elements are a beautiful case of common notions. It's humans understanding, pulling apart different parts of the world, isolating them, looking at how you can make combinations of them, looking at how the idea changes what they are and what you are. So a common notion is a way of engaging within the world. The point of course, about elements is that we arrange them according to mathematical orders. And yes, you might be able to build microscopes that will relate to atoms so you can kind of see the electrons. But when the idea was formed, it was a pure common notion. It was just that which was shared across different elements of the universe. Things had in common, things didn't have in common. So, I've gone far from habits. Let's go back to them. A habit. How does that help you? Well, there are clearly 4 different ways. First of all, without good habits, you're not going to have good ideas. I'm probably on Virginia Woolf. What is it a woman must have in order to be an author? A room of her own. You need a space to create in, and a time to create in. So a habit is that which allows you to tear yourself from all the hubbub of nature, to give yourself your moment to think in. As such, it can be very private, very personal. I get up very, very early. It allows me a habit. It is the habit in which I do my thinking. When I'm not thinking, I actually get up later, but come back to that. But that is the least form, the closest to Hume. Because there is a second aspect to habit, which is kind of the second one of the first 2 theories of knowledge. The first one is all about perception. The second one is all about hearsay knowledge. And there is habit is structure. And structure is the most important element of any thought that pretends to be scientific or actually is scientific. If it isn't structured, according to certain rules of habit, you know it isn't science. So there are rules of experimentation. There are rules by which you assess data. There are rules by which you share data. These are the great habits of science. And what they do is they allow data to all be shared in exactly the same way. They take it, all data must necessarily therefore be at the gates of common notions. Common notions are shared by all humans, understood immediately. Comprehended, once they are comprehended, shareable, usable, powerful. And what the habits of science do is to create that, if you like, in skeletal form, by demanding that every idea conforms to a certain standard, conforms to the standard of common notions. And if the idea can't conform, if it isn't universalizable, if it isn't generalizable, if you can't make predictions on it that other people can then do, it ain't science. And if it can't be written up in certain ways, it ain't science. Of course, that restricts all the things that science can do, because science can only do things that can conform to those habits. And it is perfectly plausible you would have non-scientific thought that doesn't conform to the habits of science. It's plausible, but unlikely, if I'm honest with you, if you want to form it as common notions. It would have to be one of the first 2 types of knowledge, probably. Thirdly, and for me most importantly, habits present the chink in that allows different forms of reality to come through. So, for instance, just to give you two examples, one personal, one scientific. I'll do the scientific one first. The point about the wobble in Mercury, which is the one I always use because it is the one that lives clearest in my head. I worry about always using it. I don't like philosophers who only ever use one example, like swimming, to illustrate common notions, because it means they haven't been able to work it out properly. So you may judge me harshly on this. But I actually think it's a very good example of this, that the wobble in Mercury's orbit. So this is the problem left over from Newton. Newton's calculations created a habit, a means that would allow you to understand every single planet's orbiting of the sun. A set of calculations that they could just repeat and do and do and do. And the doing of them became the stuff of universities. Except, of course, there was one anomaly. One didn't work. And that was Mercury. Because the observations and the calculations were always at odds with Mercury. The point is that within a habit, within an established habit, it was crying out that some of the truth was also there. So the very establishment of the truth, the very establishment of the habit and the common notion that was underpinning the habit about the nature of gravity was somehow being broken. It gave you the exception. And it was only because everything else was fixed and certain that you could understand that there was a problem. And of course, that problem was one of the things that the theory of relativity famously explained. And created a theory of common notions that transcended Newton and that allowed you to understand and comprehend all of Newton, but also the wobble on Mercury. The habit, then, is what is leading you towards the common notion, saying we have to have a theory that allows also for this. More than that, it gives you what is the same and what is different. It creates the very conditions through which common notions can be at all. But I also have a personal example, and I've been hinting this one. Why do I get up at 6:30 every morning? Because I fight a running battle with epilepsy, which can lay me out. But if I manage my brain right, and that is a moving, evolving thing, and I use common notions to do it, I will not be epileptic year in, year out. So much so that I'll sometimes forget that I need to manage my brain, and then it all goes haywire again. And how do I do it? One of the ways I do it is by always monitoring when I need to sleep and when I need to get up. I've got a habit. My habit is always getting up terribly early in the morning and going to bed terribly early at night. I'm a total lark. But it evolves. It changes. The framework then allows me to monitor the epilepsy, to work out what's going on, how I can have different thoughts. It gives me the framework to manage the condition. It allows me, therefore, an understanding that is not just mine alone. I'm not sure I like getting up early in the morning. Let me be very clear, I do it. I always do it, but I probably react as badly as any teenage boy to 5 o'clock in the morning. But I just force myself to do it because I know it helps my brain. But it gives me that framework to understand the changes, chemical, physical, whatever, that prefigure my epilepsy, that allow me to enter into different combinations with the world, form different common notions with the world that actually avoid it, evolve beyond it, create different connections within me. So the habit is the therapy. And because it allows me to notice the exceptions to the habit. A good habit then is not just I do this, but also in remembering all the times that I do it, I see the other rules. You can see here I'm in difference in repetition, because for me a good habit is not just the if, then. A good habit is also, a good rationalist habit also includes an and. It also includes all the exceptions to the rule, and understanding that those exceptions will affect the rule, and may in fact allow you to reform it, to rework it, to make it free in a different sense, to make it sing in a different sense. If only you could find out how the different variations fold back into the whole. It therefore is taking you right to the gates of common notions, because a common notion is that in which all those habits are caught in a single axis. that then allows further change. Finally, habit and common notions feel the same in the mind. The point about a common notion is when you understand it, yes, you get a moment of utter realization, but then you can just see it everywhere, understand it everywhere. And habits are how we experience that in our day-to-day existence. They are how we are already it, how we are caught up in what it means for us to have a common notion, in being able to predict the future, in being able to know what is being able to happening, in mapping out everything. They are us, our mind, therefore, as it is in the middle of itself, but also as it understands how it is within a universe that is different from it, but it is allowing it to be at all. That is in some sort of acquiescence with it, I suppose. And that in the union of the two is what a common notion feels like. So that when you get an idea, it feels like it must have always have been true, even as it changes everything that you are. The habit, therefore, is what the common notion feels like before you've actually formed it. But also, once you've established the common notion, it will appear in your mind as if it was already a habit. It is the prefiguring, the dark precursor, I suppose I could say. Habit, therefore, really matters. You need to watch your habits, not because they are who and what you are. Oh no, but rather because they are who and what you can become. To shifting your habits, to understanding how they change, to evolving them. They allow you to enter into some sort of communication with reality, actuality, whatever you want to call it. I would probably call it the mutuality of being. So that your habits are more than you. They're also everything you could ever be.